So as I mentioned earlier, we start this morning into so-called ordinary time, where the focus of our gospel readings turn to the teaching and preaching and healing ministry of Jesus. It's where we see him at work and hear his words, and by watching and listening to him, learn what our own lives and ministries are called to be about and to look like. This morning, we're back in Matthew, still pretty early in the story. Jesus has called his disciples, and now this morning, Matthew says their names. And because he says them, we remember them this morning 2 millennia later. It brings to mind other names that have been said recently with the same purpose in mind, so that they too might not be forgotten. But here's a thing I'd never noticed before about this motley list of names that Jesus called to be his closest followers. I already knew they included a Peter who would deny him 3 times when his fear got the best of him. And that the names included one Judas Iscariot, who would betray him into the hands of the political and religious elite who were so threatened by the ministry of this itinerant preacher, made so nervous by the ways he was calling the people of Israel back to their truest selves, that they would convict him on trumped-up charges and give him the death penalty, even though they knew he was innocent. But here's something about that group of disciples that I'd never paid attention to before. They also included an enormous diversity of political views. Matthew, the tax collector, was by his very job a collaborator with the hated Romans, under whose thumb the people of Israel were living. He was sleeping with the enemy, some would have said. And in fact, in that mix of people to whom Jesus gave all his authority, there was also Simon the Canaanian, who would definitely have said Matthew was sleeping with the enemy, because he was a zealot. He wanted to overthrow the Roman oppressors by any means possible. And it struck me. In the midst of the divisiveness swirling all around us, and of which we've all grown so despairing, this list of disciples should give us hope. Because disciples then and now have always been diverse. Jesus has always called his followers from all sorts of differing views about the world, about politics, about God. And then, like now, he calls us to a shared mission in spite of all that. And perhaps not even in spite of all that, but maybe, just maybe, because of all that. Because now that they are called, and now that they have been with him a little while, able to watch and see how he's doing things, Jesus is about to send them out to do the very same things. And just maybe, their foibles, their fears, their weaknesses, their differences will make them more able to begin relationships with the ones whom they'll encounter as they go. Jesus gives them all authority, Matthew tells us, to do what he himself has been doing. Go, says Jesus, out into the world, cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. And oh, is there sickness in our world, St. Mark's, and oh, are there demons of all sorts that hold people captive, and oh, are there people literally dying for new life, for a new life, for the possibility of abundant life. There is the demon of racism that has a stranglehold on our nation and always will, until we have the courage to tell ourselves the truth and the courage to see and listen deeply, and most of all, the courage to act. Because Jesus did not say here, as the disciples are heading out, go, and when you see people in need of healing or freedom or new life, think good thoughts. Maybe start a prayer circle. He said, heal, raise, cure, cast out. They are all action verbs, every one of them. You're called out there to be workers in the field, says Jesus, out into the midst of the harvest. Now, here's the thing about harvests and harvesting. They're all rather mundane and ordinary. It takes endurance to harvest and perseverance, and it takes more than one person always. Harvest is when the whole community comes together, at least for a time, to get the task done, because the task will not wait. And the harvest is never about the laborers. It's always about the sustenance that's pulled in and stored up, and now available for many to use and be nourished from. It's not a glamorous job. It's simply part and parcel of what makes life possible for individuals, families, entire communities. It's what makes a future possible for everyone. And before they head off, Jesus gives some more instructions to the disciples. Don't expect payment. Don't stock up on supplies. Expect that if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, some people will welcome you and some people won't. Don't worry about that. Just keep going. And in fact, he says, some people will not only not welcome you, some will be so threatened by what you're doing, so threatened by the alternative kind of world that you are proclaiming is possible, that they will do everything they can to stop you, indirectly or directly, including even violently. In other words, if you're going out to those who need healing, those who are bone weary, those who are not free, you may lose your own freedom. But there are some kinds of prisons and imprisonments that actually bring life. The question is whether you'll risk it. To be my disciples, he's saying, you must learn humility and deep listening. And he says this to them, not so much in words, but in what he does. Because notice where this whole sending scene started. Jesus looked, made a point of it, and he saw, really saw, the crowds who were clamoring all around him. He paid attention, took time to notice, had conversations and truly listened. And when he heard and saw and recognized their pain, the hunger in their eyes, the pleading hope of something more, he had compassion on them, Matthew says, which means he literally felt them in his belly. It viscerally twisted his gut to see that pain. And then, with that compassion in his heart, he went to work. And now he is sending out his disciples to do the same. So he's saying, don't stand off, doing ministry from afar. Get out there and live among the crowds. Become their neighbors in every way possible. Leave your egos at home. Enter every encounter with humility. Don't take money. Instead, depend entirely on the generosity of others. Accept their hospitality. Don't live in some kind of naive bubble. Be aware of the way the world really is, so you're not caught off guard. And so that you deeply understand the pain that you're hearing and seeing. And don't worry about what you'll say when you're asked to give an accounting for your work, because the Spirit will be right there, present and reliable in the moment. It is challenging work we're being called to here, St. Mark's. And our job is to discern together whether we're up for it and what it might look like. But there are two more things I want to share that struck me this week. And the first is this. The compassion that Jesus had for the crowds is the same compassion that Jesus promises to each of us. We are sent out, sure, but we are also the ones to whom Jesus came. And right now, we are suffering like those crowds. in varied ways and some more acutely than others, but we are suffering nonetheless. The COVID world we're living in is getting very wearisome. Though by God's grace and the careful measures we've taken, La Plata County has the lowest transmission rate in Colorado, so we haven't lost a single parishioner. But we have lost important things nonetheless. And I want us all to remember that Jesus is looking on us with compassion, is seeing our pain, our anxiety, and our longing to just get over with this already. I'm about to make a final comment about ministry and hard work and the courage it all takes. But I'm also aware in this moment that we are all tired and that we need to have compassion for each other and for ourselves. That perhaps this is the main task to which God is calling us for a time. But here's one final thought that Andy Doyle, the Bishop of Texas, left me with this week in his blog. Bishop Doyle is passionate about transforming churches from places that welcome people when they come in, attractional churches he calls them, into missional churches. Parishes that learn how to nurture and grow not just disciples, but apostles, which of course is what Jesus is doing this morning with his own disciples, transforming them from those who are taught to those who teach, from those who receive to those who give. And what the bishop wrote about this week is that this action of Jesus, this sending the disciples out, was an utterly radical thing to do. Because the religion of the day always called the faithful in, required them to be pilgrims and come to Jerusalem, always called them to the temple to make their offerings there. That's what faithfulness looked like. That's what everyone was used to. And now Jesus was turning all that on its head. Jesus was saying, no, it's not about gathering, not about coming to the big worship place. It's about going out where the people are who really need me. And I wondered, isn't that maybe exactly the thing that has happened to us, St. Mark's? That we're being called to that same change of direction? Because now we literally can't go back into our worship space, can't make that the center of our work, our chief focus. I don't know what my question actually means. And I know we could only figure out any answers together in conversation. And I am definitely not saying, so hear me now, I don't want rumors flying around. I am definitely not saying that we shouldn't be working as well and as hard and as best we can to get back into that building when it's safe. But I do wonder if there is not yet more for us to learn while we can't be there. For us to begin to understand about what God is really calling us to, if we're to be faithful in our calls as ones who are sent. So hear the challenge in this morning's gospel. If we really hear the pain of our world and then really act, it will require us to change. And that will be messy and dicey, and it will make some people mad and other people delighted, and neither of those things should be our focus. Our only focus should be on what we believe Jesus is saying to us, popular or not, easy or not, challenging or not. The truth is, we'll make mistakes. We'll try new things and utterly fail, but we'll commit to failing well, to learn from what we tried and then try something else. And the truth is, it will also be more fun and more joyful and more life-giving than anything we've done before. Because when we're living together in the presence of the Spirit, that's where true life actually happens. It's what Jesus knew and is trying to tell his disciples. It won't be easy, but it sure will be wonderful. Because you'll be living the way God created you to live. You'll be the person and the people you were created to be. And then the reign of God really will have come near, just like I promised. So go and get to work and start really living. Amen.